The McLaren MP4-18 is the most famous unraced car in Formula 1 history. A World Championship winning team with the top designer in F1 is not the usual recipe for a car that fails to turn a wheel in anger, but in 2003 that's exactly what happened when Adrian Newey pushed the limits too far. Over the course of the 2003 season, the MP4-18 went from being intentionally late to disappearing almost without mention, and all the while McLaren was trying to win a championship with an updated version of its predecessor. A story like that seems unthinkable today, so how did it happen back then? If you want to hear an even more in-depth look at this story, check out our Bring Back V10's podcast series, which has an entire episode dedicated to the MP4-18. McLaren and everyone else had taken a battering at the hands of Ferrari in 2002 with a car Newey described as a clumsy design that wasn't one of his best. It was agreed that a big step was needed for 2003, so the launch of the MP4-18 was pushed back. McLaren worked on an update package for the MP4-17, which in its D-spec form was looking good in pre-season testing. David Coulthard and Kimi Raikkonen won the first two races of the year with the 17D, and it was briefly 3 from 3 until it was decided that Giancarlo Fisichella's Jordan had actually won the red-flagged Brazilian Grand Prix. That strong start to the season emboldened McLaren to take its time with the MP4-18. Originally, it had been suggested the car could make its debut as early as round 4 at Imola, but gradually its launch date started to drift later into the year. Ferrari had also started the year with its 2002 car, but when its 2003 machine first appeared at the Spanish Grand Prix in May, Michael Schumacher took a dominant victory. That prompted pressure from inside and outside of McLaren, with Coulthard calling for the new car to race as soon as possible. Newey continued to resist that pressure though, saying McLaren risked shooting itself in the foot by forcing the MP4-18 into action too early. When the car finally launched on the 20th of May, Newey admitted the delays were frustrating. He said the aero designs were finalised in mid-February, but McLaren was using new manufacturing techniques, and it underestimated the level of resources required to keep one car racing competitively while trying to develop another for the same season. As soon as the car broke cover, it was clear it delivered on McLaren's promise that it was a radical step. From front to back, there were significant aerodynamic and packaging changes. Newey claimed the car had more research put into it than any other design he had worked on, and he praised Mercedes for its efforts in meeting his extreme demands. But were they too extreme? The car was unreliable from the off. Team members would wait in the pits at the end of every run poised with fire extinguishers, as the car always returned with something on fire. The car was harder to work on than previous models, with routine tasks for mechanics becoming huge jobs due to the uncompromising nature of the design. The MP4-18 was the first step towards the extreme packaging solutions that have become the norm in F1 today, but in 2003 it was pushing the limits too far. As word got out about the car's unreliability, McLaren said it would not race it until it was at least as fast and reliable as the 17D, which was still keeping Raikkonen in the title hunt. As the summer dragged on, McLaren claimed the car was quick and just needed to be made reliable, but this wasn't the case. Newey has since described the car as a problem child that was giving good numbers in the wind tunnel but turned out to be aerodynamically unstable on track. The car was slow and gave its drivers no confidence. To make matters worse, Raikkonen and test driver Alex Wurz had massive accidents, which McLaren stated publicly were down to driver error. Raikkonen didn't take that suggestion well, as his former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley told us on our Bring Back V10's podcast.
Kimi doesn't take well to having something that wasn't his fault blamed on him, and I can tell you inside he was very angry at that, and I'm pretty sure I remember that it was the only time he ever drove the car, because I think he point blank refused to get in it after that, not just because it was a terrible car, but because McLaren had shifted blame towards him when he was adamant it wasn't his fault.
Once Newey identified the problem, which he felt was being caused by the shape of the chassis and the front of the side pod, he felt the solution was to redesign them. A chassis redesign is a huge job, which would have almost certainly meant pushing the car back to 2004. Newey felt the underwhelming 2002 car was partly caused by McLaren's new matrix management structure, which Ron Dennis ordered Martin Whitmarsh to put in place after Newey tried to leave for Jaguar. The idea was to make sure that one person never had the power Newey had in that situation, by creating a flatter structure of department heads who could all work together. Newey described it as wretchedly unworkable. But that was nothing compared to what was about to happen with the MP4-18. The project caused a divide in the McLaren factory, with Newey pushing for his redesign, and other parts of the team, led by Paddy Lowe and Pat Fry, telling Whitmarsh the car could be made reliable and competitive as it was. Whitmarsh called a meeting of all of the engineering heads and asked for a show of hands on what to do, which enraged Newey. He felt it was a rigged vote designed to overrule him, and it left him questioning what the point of his role was now he wasn't able to make the final decision on major technical matters. While all this was going on, McLaren was still fighting for a world championship with Raikkonen in the MP4-17D. Raikkonen didn't add to his victory in Malaysia all year, but his consistency and a new points system for 2003 that reduced the gap between first and second in a race to just 2 points helped him stay in the hunt with Schumacher and Ferrari all season. Following a summer testing ban, McLaren planned to take a fleet of MP4-18s to a pre-Italian Grand Prix test at Monza. But Dennis then revealed that more work had gone into an update for the 17D and that it was highly unlikely the 18 would race. That was the last we heard of the car, as McLaren never formally announced the project being canned. Raikkonen only missed out on the title by 2 points, and there was a strong belief at McLaren that if the MP4-18 had been shelved earlier, more effort could have gone into the 17D and the championship was there for the taking. Mercedes had also diverted most of its attention to the MP4-18 due to Newey's packaging demands. The car also had exhausts feeding the floor and the diffuser to begin with, an idea Newey would master years later at Red Bull. But it didn't work on this McLaren, and the exhausts had to be reworked to come out of the top of the car as was the standard design at the time. The MP4-18 is famous for being the car that never raced, but Newey believes it did. McLaren revealed its 2004 car, the MP4-19, just after the 2003 season, and Dennis said it was clear the unraced car was the mother of the new machine. But Newey says the cars were identical, and McLaren just changed the badge from 18 to 19. Sure enough, McLaren's start to 2004 was woeful, and eventually Newey got his wish to redesign the chassis. A B-spec car was released mid-season, and the result was an instant upturn in McLaren's fortunes and a race win for Raikkonen at Spa. McLaren knew all along that the principles of the original attempt were right, and by 2005 those ideas had evolved into the MP4-20, a phenomenal car that could have won the championship with Raikkonen. That's it for our look back at the MP4-18, and remember, if you want to hear much more about this and what was going on in McLaren at the time, check out our Bring Back V10s podcast. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments who you think was to blame for the failure of the MP4-18. Did Newey overreach with the radical design, or was McLaren wrong to overrule him when he called for a new chassis? We want to hear what you think.